Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between. I'm Tyler, and I haven't done a video in a while. The last video I made, I was announcing the publication of my first book. That was exciting, very exciting times. If you want to check out my book, it is called The Two Lives of Thomas Allen, and it is available on Amazon. You can get the Kindle version, or you can get the physical copy through Amazon. Published it through KDP, and it is fairly successful in my opinion for my standards. It's more successful than I ever thought it would be. Just me, a nobody who is writing a book that's semi-autobiographical. So shouting that out, do a little shameless plug, and there you go. With that out of the way, I have finished my journey to the Dark Tower. I ceased my journey at one point and decided that I wasn't going to continue, and then changed my mind and continued, and I'm very, very, very glad that I did. And so I want to talk about the last 3 books in the series. I have not read The Wind Through the Keyhole yet. I do own it. I have not read that yet, but I'm going to put that off for another time whenever I feel like revisiting the quartet. But at this point in time, I am finished with my journey to the tower, and I'm ready to read something else. But I do want to talk about the last 3 books in this video. First of which, Wolves of the Calla. This is book 5 in the series. I enjoyed this book. I did not enjoy this book as much as the first 4. And I did not enjoy this book as much as other people have enjoyed this book. This is a lot of people's favorite book in the series. Although I understand, I think why. It's not necessarily my favorite. It's not my favorite at all. It's actually one of my least favorite. But I did enjoy it. It is a very much a slower pace. It takes its time, the build up. It's also basically the Magnificent Seven, but Stephen King's version of it. And I found myself a little bit bored at times reading this. It took me a little bit longer to read than the others. It is a thicker book, but I can get through a thick book whenever I'm entertained. This book really picks up near the end. That's when this book really finds its stride, near the end of it. But as it stands, I do give it 4 out of 5 stars. Still a quality novel, still great. Just not quite as great as the others, in my opinion. So Wolves of the Calla, 4 out of 5. Then we have Song of Susanna. This is the book where I decided I was not going to continue my journey. I was right in the middle of Song of Susanna. It is not nearly as thick as the others. It's actually one of the shortest. It's a little bit longer than The Gunslinger, but not quite as long as the other books in the series. And this book really had me very bored. I'll be honest with you. It's a filler book. Part of me wonders if King realized that he was going to have a 6-book series, and he didn't want that, so he decided to put this little in-between book to make it 7 books. part of me wonders that that may not be the case. He may have thought, well, I'm going to have two enormous books or one enormous book at the end if I don't put another one in there. It just feels like filler space. There's a lot of palaver, to use the term that the books use. There's a lot of dialogue. A lot of, in my opinion, dialogue that isn't necessary. There's a lot of really rich dialogue and really, really good conversations, but there's a lot that's not really, there's not a lot that goes on. And the book builds and builds and builds up to this event that does not happen in this book. That's kind of it's kind of it's a negative in my opinion. But for those of you who don't know, King wrote books 1 through 4 over a long period of time. He wrote them here and there in between his other works, and then he had an accident in 1999 where he was hit by a car. It almost killed him, and after he recovered, he decided he was going to write the last 3 books of the series, and he wrote them very quickly and published them right after the other. And it was in this book that I was like, okay, I feel like he's rushed things, and I feel like he just wanted to get it over with and get it done and get it out there. And I was like, this is just, I don't like the direction this is going. So I put it down. I put it down for quite a while, for months, and picked it back up at the beginning of the year. And once I got to the 11th stanza, because this is Song of Susanna, it is written in stanzas instead of chapters. Once I got to the 11th stanza, everything picked right back up again, and I'm like, okay, I see where King is going. I see what he's doing, and I'm on board. I got back on board the train, the mono, if you will. I loved this book after the 11th stanza, from the 11th stanza on. But like I said, up until that point, it was very slow and boring at times. And then it builds up to an event that doesn't happen. And so I have to give this book 4 out of 5 stars as well. The 11th stanza on is enough to keep it from being 3 out of 5 stars. But I would have to do 4 out of 5 before the 11th stanza. Then, what I never expected to be my favorite in the series. My favorite was The Drawing of the Three. The Drawing of the Three blew my mind. I read it so fast. I chewed through that book. That was my number 1. My number 2 was The Wastelands. I read it almost just as fast, and it's a thicker book. But I'm telling you, every second of this book is riveting. It is very well paced, in my opinion. King found his stride there. This book is packed full of emotions. I cried, I laughed myself to tears in times. I was sick at my stomach and I was terrified at times. This book was everything that I want out of a King novel. All of the emotion and all of the fear and the terror and the adventure. This became my favorite in the series. I read this in 10 days. This is not, I believe that Wizard and Glass is the longest, but this is the second longest in the series. This is almost as long as Wizard and Glass. I read this in 10 days. I chewed through this book so fast, and I loved every second of it. This book is amazing. 5 out of 5. Wonderful stars. Perfection I'm so glad that I continued the journey. I'm so glad that I took up my quest again and finished my journey to the tower, because this book is incredible. Which brings me to my ranking. I would have to say book number 7, The Dark Tower, is my number 1. The Dawn of the Three would be slipped back down to my number 2. The Wastelands would be my number 3. Wizard and Glass would have to be my number 4. The Gunslinger, my number 5. Even though all of those entries that I just mentioned, all of those 5 books are 5 out of 5 stars in my opinion. That's my ranking. So The Gunslinger will be my number 5. My number 6 would be Wolves of the Calla. And my number 7, unfortunately, Song of Susanna. But there has to be a number 7. And not every book can be perfect. And this series as a whole, I think, is an amazing feat. It is an incredible achievement. It is genius. There's periods of sheer genius in these books. I recommend these books to anybody. Like, yes, you have to have a stomach for horror, because there are very horrific elements in these books. But they are not a horror series. They are a fantasy series with horror elements. So if you're into fantasy, if you're into just good books, just rich character development, the character development in these books is so amazing. I cannot brag on it enough. The character development is where these books shine. Like, it is wonderful. And I'm so glad that I took this journey, and I'm ready to read something else. I think I'm going to read The Green Mile next. Still going to be reading King for a little while, probably, because I've ascended the tower, and I'm very excited about it. And so I'm going to read The Green Mile. I will eventually read The Wind Through the Keyhole, probably at some other time. Like I said, whenever I want to get back to the quartet. And the Wind Through the Keyhole is an in-between book. It is set in between Wizard and Glass and Wolves of the Calla. And the way I understand it is it's Rowan telling stories. I will read that eventually, but I think I'm going to save it for when I'm missing the quartet. And I'll pick that one up and I'll read it. I do intend to read Eyes of the Dragon, which is very much a prequel to the Dark Tower series. I do intend to read Hearts in Atlantis, which has Dark Tower tie-ins. I do intend to read again Everything's Eventual, because I did read it in high school, but I had no knowledge of the Dark Tower at the time. And I've forgotten almost everything that I read except for 1408 and Riding the Bullet. So I will read that again and be watching for the Dark Tower tie-ins. I heard that Little Sisters of Illyria is the Dark Tower story, and then as well as Hearts in Atlantis, Low Men in Yellow Coats is obviously a Dark Tower story. So I'm very pleased with the journey that I've taken, and I mean, the series as a whole gets a 5 out of 5. It is a wonderful series. It's one of my favorite series of all time. This series is incredible. It's wonderful. And I have to thank Cy King for the moments of pure joy that I experienced, and all of the emotions that I experienced in this series. Just all of the wizard's rainbow of emotions that I experienced in this series. And I'm so glad that he finished it, and very, very, very glad. So that's all I have to say, I believe. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.